Welcome to One. Mitch McConnell is the Senate Republican leader. First elected to that position in 2006, he's the 15th Senate Republican leader and only the second Kentuckian to lead his party in the Senate. He currently serves as a senior member of Appropriations, Agriculture, and Rules. Senator McConnell is next on One.
From the nation's capital, this is a special edition of One with Bill Goodman. Members of the Kentucky congressional delegation discuss issues important to the nation and the Commonwealth. Tonight from Washington, Senator Mitch McConnell on One.
Senator, thanks so much for inviting us into your Russell office today for this conversation. We appreciate it very much. It's beautiful.
Glad to have you here, Bill.
This first question is a toughie. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Do you think the University of Louisville football team will go undefeated next year, and will the basketball team repeat as champions?
Well, the football team has a really easy schedule, so there'll be a lot of pressure on them to go undefeated. Predicting anybody to go undefeated, I think, is a bit of a stretch, but I think they'll be good, and the U of L basketball team and the UK team will be spectacular again next year.
You had to throw that UK team in there, didn't you?
No, I like them both.
Did you go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner?
No, I didn't.
But you certainly were aware of President Obama's remark, and when somebody suggested that Congress and the White House need to work closer together, and somebody had suggested to him that you ought to have a drink with Senator McConnell, and he said, you have a drink with Senator McConnell, and then this appeared.
Well, I thought this was in Hazard. I thought the least I could do was to suggest maybe the president come on down to Hazard in the heart of coal country, and if he wanted to have a drink, I'd be happy to meet him there. And actually, we did a follow-up photo at the Derby Saturday, too.
Empty chair and all?
Yeah, empty chair.
Well, let me ask you this. Politico had a piece on April 14th, which said that, wrote this. Mitch McConnell still hasn't gotten over Democratic's traumatic fiscal cliff, December's traumatic fiscal cliff showdown. The Senate Minority Leader has signaled privately that he has no interest in sitting in the same room as Majority Leader Harry Reid to discuss a possible grand bargain on budget and taxes. And then they quoted you as hinting at McConnell, according to Politico, is fine with talking to Obama, just talking at this point, but he doesn't want Reid there when it happens. Are things really that bad?
No, they aren't. First of all, I didn't have anything to get over after the fiscal cliff. I not only didn't have any trouble getting over it, I'm bragging about what we did as a result of the negotiation at the 11th hour that Joe Biden and I were in for the third time. By the way, all three of the big deals that have been made between Republicans and this administration, the Vice President and I have done. The December 2010 two-year extension of the Bush tax cuts, the August 2011 deficit reduction package, the Budget Control Act, and then, of course, the New Year's Eve deal. So I didn't have anything to get over. I felt great about it. We saved 99% of Kentuckians and Americans from getting a tax increase, got a permanent $5 million a year exemption on the estate tax, which will save virtually every family farm and small business in Kentucky from having to be sold to pay the death tax that the federal government imposes when you pass away, and a top rate of 20% on capital gains and dividends. So I didn't have anything to get over. Most people thought, frankly, that we got the best of that bargain, and I was happy about it. It's also permanent law, and the reason that's important, Bill, is when you have permanent law, sure, it can be changed, but you don't get to one day like that and it all goes away. No cliff, no new cliff. But permanent law, which you can change, but when you change it, it has to go through the House, the Senate, and be signed by the President. So with regard to Harry Reid, that's fine, but in every, we don't have any problems. In fact, just earlier today, as you and I are meeting, we were together listening to a speech to a joint session of Congress from the new female president of Korea. So we don't have a problem. It's just that every time there's been a negotiation, the fact of the matter is there's only one Democrat who really counts, and that's the President of the United States. Under our system, the President's very important. He's the only person that can sign something into law and the only person that can deliver members of his party to vote for it. So typically, when we have ended up in these situations, congressional Democrats become kind of irrelevant because they frankly do whatever the administration agrees to.
Well, you have said just in the last couple of days, if not in the last 24 hours, on the possibility of another grand bargain or at least negotiations, that you will not vote to increase the party, the minority, will not vote to increase the debt limit if not attached to legislation to reduce the federal deficit. And you've kind of had that mantra throughout, and you're sticking to that.
Not unusual. Going back to the 1950s, presidential requests to raise the debt ceiling have carried along with it significant legislation, the Congressional Review Act, the Graham-Rudman deficit reduction proposal, the 1997 Bill Clinton Republican Congress deficit reduction proposal, the August 2011 Budget Control Act that we were discussing a moment ago. All were done in connection with a presidential request to raise the debt ceiling. What would be irresponsible, of course, is to raise the debt ceiling without doing anything about the debt. We now have a gross debt the size of our economy. It makes it look a lot like a Western European country. This is this transcendent issue, the biggest issue confronting the country. It'd be wonderful if the president would lead on this rather than us having to kind of drag him into the table. But of course we want to talk about the biggest issue in the country.
Well, let's talk about those things, but let's also talk about some state issues. And one of those things that you've done that affects Kentucky and other coal-producing states, announcing the plan to introduce the Coal Jobs Protection Act. I want you to tell us about that, then I'll have some follow-up questions. What was the real intent in introducing that at this time?
Well, we know that the EPA in this administration is very hostile to the coal industry. And frankly, that's a result of the election. They elected a president who is hostile to the coal industry. There's not much, frankly, we can do about that. The president won the election. He's going to be there for 3.5 more years. These particular bills are targeted at trying to get a decision, yes or no, out of EPA on two types of permits that have to be granted in order to go forward to mine coal. What it does is give a time limit, just make a decision. Decision with this administration, frankly, in many instances might be no. But at least the decision is made within a timely period of time that allows you to plan your business. If you're sort of stuck in limbo, in perpetuity, waiting around, you can't make investment decisions. You can't decide whether the mine is going to go forward. So what it would do is simply require them to make a decision, yes or no, doesn't tell them how to decide it within a specific period of time.
If these permits are granted with coal production at its lowest level since 1965, are you confident that would help and increase coal production? I mean, I don't guess it could.
It might not
hurt. It might not.
It might not. I mean, the agency might decide to say no. We're not telling them how to decide. They might decide to say no. But at least it would eliminate the uncertainty. If you're running a business, in this particular instance, a coal business, and you can't get a decision, you can't plan. And so what you begin to do is to lay off people. You'd rather have a decision, even if it's no, so you can shift your investment into another direction. So this kind of administrative purgatory has been really devastating in East Kentucky. I wish I could say it was just confined to the coal business. In fact, the administration across the board, whether it's in healthcare, financial services, even traditional agencies where there is not new legislation, have got an army of regulators whose bias is if you're making a profit, you're up to no good. So, you know, they got to come in here and help you. And this has been a huge wet blanket over our entire economy and made it very difficult for us to come out of this deep recession.
Outside of coal production in eastern Kentucky, what other suggestions would you have as far as diversification of employment there, of the workforce, and sort of propping up eastern Kentucky as best we can in the state?
As you know full well, because you cover state government pretty heavily, that's a state responsibility. They have a commerce department, spend a lot of time competing with Tennessee and Indiana and other places. And every governor I can recall, regardless of party, has been involved in trying to diversify the economy in East Kentucky. And I know Governor Beshear cares about that, as Governor Fletcher did. About all we can do as the federal government is deal with the issues that we are directly responsible for. economic development tends to be kind of peripheral to the federal job, but central to the efforts of governors and state legislatures.
The Freedom to Fish Act,
Yeah.
which I've read some about because there's some House members from Kentucky who also have been involved in that process. Tell me about what you've done in that area.
Well, it's another example of the nanny state, you know, trying to protect us against every conceivable thing that could go wrong. In this particular instance, it's the Corps of Engineers telling people they can't fish downstream from our dams, a big issue in Tennessee as well. And, you know, after a number of months of arguing with the Corps, Senator Alexander and Senator Corker down in Tennessee and Senator Paul and myself finally decided they weren't going to respond. So we're introducing legislation that basically would keep them from preventing people from fishing below the dam. Now, the argument they're making, of course, is a safety argument, the assumption being that the fishermen below the dam are idiots. and don't know that you can't do that while the dam is spilling.
Yeah.
And in fact, the statistics, Bill, are stunning. Dramatically more people have lost their lives in the lakes than below the dam, because the fishermen who fish below the dams are not stupid. They know that you don't go there when the dam is spilling. And it's just an example of the nanny state, if you will, on steroids. Trying to protect us against every conceivable adverse outcome in our lives. It's nonsense. And we're going to be able to get that passed. I think we're going to be able to prevent them from doing this.
Now, it's a Corps of Engineer edict?
Yeah. I mean, basically what they were going to do is make it essentially impossible for you to fish for below the dams. And, you know, that's, many argue, the best fishing. But it also presumes that these fishermen are insane, that they don't know anything about, you know, being around water. And when you look at the number of the county judges down there in Lyon and Livingston County have all the statistics, very smart guys. They've studied all of this. And the dramatically greater number of people have lost their lives to drowning in the lakes than fishing below the dam. So it's just another example of this mentality that is so rampant these days that the government is going to, you know, try to protect us from every conceivable thing that could go wrong in our lives. I mean, they could keep on and squeeze all the fun out of living.
Why is there such enthusiasm about hemp? Why is there such vigor among the Kentucky delegation to again ask the federal government to make a slight change? What difference?
Very
do you
good
think
question. You know, you asked me earlier what people like me and Senator Paul and others could do in the economic development area, and I said, you know, it's not a main thrust of being a U.S. senator, but here's an example of a product that's legal in most countries that could positively impact the Kentucky economy. So this is one of those examples. They don't come along all that often when you're senator as opposed to being governor. But here's an example of something we thought made a lot of sense. Agriculture Commissioner Jamie Comer did a heck of a job of developing the case in favor. I think did an excellent job of convincing at least most of the law enforcement people that this was not going to produce a situation where that the plants were distinct from marijuana, and that it really was not going to produce the kind of law enforcement problem that some of the sheriffs are worried about. And so it was one of those rare opportunities that the federal government actually was involved in that could have a positive impact on our economy, and that's why we got interested in it.
The analytical mind of Congressman Thomas Massey, who brings this engineer's ability to parse through all of the detail. So I asked him, had he looked at the hemp legislation or the legislation that what he wants the federal government to do as you do, in a way that he's confident that it is going to produce those jobs and it is going to bring some economic viability to the people who want to use it. And he says he has. I mean, he's studied it enough, studied other countries. He knows what it will do to industry in Kentucky. And I would imagine that's the enthusiasm that all of you bring to supporting this.
Yeah, well, look, nobody can guarantee that a private investment is going to occur. But Thomas says, I think, has studied this more than anybody else in the delegation. And he's pretty confident that if we remove the barrier, enterprising Kentuckians who want to make money are going to take advantage of it.
Short of full repeal on Obamacare, what's possible? And there is new evidence. In fact, you've spoken on the floor just this week also about what you're hearing from some Kentucky businesses who are shirking away from what they see coming down the road. Are they telling you that?
Yeah, it's a calamity. You know, this is a bill that can't possibly work. You know, things that won't work don't. And it's cracking. So, you know, think of a dam that's beginning to develop holes, cracks, and the water's beginning to seep through. Examples of that were the Senate considered a budget recently, and one of the amendments was repeal of the medical device tax. And that passed with 79 senators, including a whole lot of very liberal senators who supported Obamacare. Just in recent weeks, the Democratic chairman of the Senate Finance Committee has said it's a train wreck. Senator Rockefeller, my neighbor from West Virginia, an enthusiastic supporter of the law, I'm paraphrasing, but said this is catastrophic. It is having a devastating effect across the board because, frankly, everything Republicans said about this is happening. Jobs are being lost. Full-time jobs are being turned into part-time jobs. I was with two different Kentucky businessmen this very week that you and I are taping this, saying that the only thing they can figure out they can do to respond to it is to downgrade full-time employees to part-time employees in order to absorb the cost. I heard from one small businessman who said his anticipated profit is about $240,000 a year, and this is going to cost him 200 of the 240. It's a disaster. Premiums are going up, jobs are being lost, and jobs that are not being lost are being turned from full-time into part-time. So your question is, you know, what do we all do in reaction to that?
Short of repeal.
Well,
short of full repeal.
Repeal is, in my view, the only way to fix it because you've got 2,700 pages here, and you may have seen the photo that recently of me in front of 20,000 pages of Obamacare regulations. At 7 feet tall, that's just the first set of regulations. Nobody can figure out what's in it. So and what they can figure out that's in it is harmful. They either can't figure it out or what they can figure out is harmful. I think repeal is the best way to do that. And I think we'll know we're making progress toward that when more and more Democrats start saying, look, you know, this just isn't working out the way I thought it would.
On the horrific events in Boston at the marathon, a lot of people are quick to say that we had a system failure in security. What do you think, and should Congress, should the Senate investigate?
Well, of course, after every horrendous event like this, you want to have an investigation. You want to find out what happened. In my view, we compounded the problem afterwards by treating this as a regular criminal law enforcement case as opposed to a terrorism case. Let me explain the difference. If you arrest a terrorist, particularly in a situation like this, getting a conviction is a piece of cake. A first-year law student could get a conviction in this case. Eyewitnesses everywhere. You know what happened. The most important thing you can do is interrogate. And so if you treat it as a terrorism case, you get greater latitude to learn, and I'm not talking about torturing people. I mean, we have very experienced interrogators. In a regular criminal case, you have an obligation to read them their Miranda rights and tell them to get a lawyer. And the first thing the lawyer says is, shut up. In a case like this, getting a conviction is, frankly, a piece of cake. That's easy. What you really want to know is more about his brother's 6 months in Russia. And as we are discovering, Did he have any friends and accomplices who may have been involved in this in some peripheral way? You want to gather as much information as you can. So, yeah, I think there ought to be an investigation about whatever systematic failures there may have been. But I also disagree with the administration's view that all of these are criminal matters. In fact, Bill, they brought Osama bin Laden's brother-in-law, a foreigner, captured on foreign soil, to New York, and read him his Miranda rights, and he got a lawyer. No foreigner even has a right. Now, this young man was a citizen, so he is in a different status. But a citizen still can be an enemy non-combatant, and if you categorize them that way, it doesn't mean you don't ultimately convict. I mean, you can still ultimately have a trial, but you have a lot more latitude on the most important thing in a terrorism case is not a conviction. That's easy. The most important thing is trying to find out who else may have been involved in it, how did they learn, how were they inspired, and all the rest. And so I think we've made that unduly difficult by treating it like we'd treat somebody, robbed a grocery store.
Has someone called for an investigation?
Oh, sure, there will be. Yeah.
Immigration, very quickly, as we try to get to as many of these issues as we can. Gang of Eight in the House working on a proposal right now. Will we have a bill in this Congress?
Let me try to give you a short answer because I know you've got a time problem. I hope so, because the status quo is terrible. I mean, apparently a couple of these accomplices or friends, whatever they were, of the Boston killers had overstayed visas. 40% of the illegals in the United States have overstayed visas. The current system is simply not working. Surely we can do better than that, and I hope that we can pass legislation that improves the status quo.
On gun legislation, an attempt to revive the bill or a bill with some changes. Did you talk with any of the families from Newtown, or have you spoken to Senator Manchin or Senator Toomey about?
Well, I've certainly talked to Manchin and Toomey, and my staff has met with a number of families of the victims of Newtown. What got very little press was there was an alternative actually voted on in the Senate that, in my view, that I supported, that in my view did a much better job of targeting the real problem here, which is not the weapons but the people using them. Why is it so easy for people who have serious mental disabilities to get access to this weapon or any other kind of weapon? That, in my view, is the great failing. Our inability to target people who have these tendencies. And as one psychiatrist recently pointed out, in his practice, it was much easier years ago to get these people the kind of care they need and to get them off the streets than it is now. It's become kind of a fashionable thing to not incarcerate may be a strong word, because basically you're trying to get them treatment, but you get them off the streets. It's become very, very difficult to do that. I think the ACLU and other groups have brought a lot of lawsuits claiming that this is inappropriate. So we end up having a whole lot of people with serious mental disabilities and the potential to kill that you can't get off the streets, even if you can identify them.
In the time remaining, tell me how you strike the balance between your duties as minority leader, as Republican leader, and defending your office as the U.S. Senator from Kentucky. Tell me how that plays out with the time spent, the attacks that you undergo back home.
Well, certainly, you take the campaign part of it. The last time I ran, before I became leader of my party, I carried 113 out of 120 counties and got 64% of the vote. One thing you get is a lot of unwanted attention. You become kind of a national figure who's, despised by the opponents. And it's pretty clear to me that disliking me or whoever is in my job is emotionally satisfying to a lot of people on the left. So you get a lot of that attention. I mean, we saw that, for example, in the bugging of our headquarters a couple of months ago. Look, I can deal with that. And in terms of doing my job, it's an enormous advantage to our state to have a senator in the position that I'm in a lot of different ways. The tobacco buyout is a good example of that. And so I think it actually helps me do my job for my state better. And Bill, you know, anybody who replaced me would not be in the position I'm in for Kentucky and the nation for decades, if ever. Mm-hmm. So I think the argument we'll be making is, in what way is the state advantaged? You know, by trading in the leader of one of the two parties in the Senate. That's only happened one other time in our state's history with Alvin Barkley, mm-hmm. for somebody brand new. Mm-hmm. In what way is that an advantage to Kentucky? I think the answer is in no way is it an advantage to Kentucky.
The two names we hear back home are now Tom Fitzgerald, mm-hmm. and Allison Lundgren Grimes. Any comment on either one of them?
No, I really don't. I mean, the campaign will occur at some point, and we'll be happy to make the arguments whenever we get an opponent.
Do you know Tom at all?
No, I don't. I've read about him for years. I've read about him for years, yeah.
And you certainly know Allison Lundgren Grimes' family, I would imagine?
I'm sure I've met him at some point.
Any choice between the two that you'd like to meet in a KET candidate for?
No, I'm not going to get into the campaign yet. That's in 2014.
The duties of the Republican leader's position, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. We're going to spend some time with you tomorrow in your office, your leadership office. Just give us a little capsule of how you approach this job and how important it is to you as well as the rest of the party.
Well, one advantage to Kentucky is that I'm in the middle of every issue, because I'm, you know, helping sort of broker the experts. You know, you have members of the conference, and most of them specialize in areas, the things that they know the most about. So I, you know, end up being involved in at least some way in all the various issues we're involved in. It's an interesting leadership challenge. You know, by some mysterious process, you've been chosen to lead a bunch of leaders. They all got big egos and sharp elbows, and they all have very different points of view, and they're all very smart, or they wouldn't have made it to this level. Mm-hmm. You know, and a Republican from Maine is very different from a Republican from Alabama. So it's an interesting leadership challenge.
Well, we look forward to being with you again. You're going to walk us through sort of a historical tour. We really appreciate you entertaining us today in your Russell office space. We will look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And thank you very much for being here.
Glad to be here.
For 1 to 1, I'm Bill Goodman.
Continue the conversation on this and other issues online at Bill Goodman's blog, Billseye. Visit us at ket.org/Billseye. And while you're there, connect with us on Facebook and Twitter.